What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, we're looking back at Prototype, and I'm just going to cut out all the fluff. This is one of my favorite games of all time. This is a game that means the world to me. I'm very excited to do this video, and we're doing it for the 15-year anniversary. This game came out back on June 9th, 2009. Truly, like, this game left a lasting mark on me. It's one of the games, I guess, all time that you just remember, right? Like, when you step into it, you say, oh yeah, I remember all the powers. I remember how to do everything. I remember how to traverse. I remember how to fight. I remember the story. I remember everything. Everything just left a mark with me. Now, I've played this game several times. Still don't have the platinum. I actually got a little bit closer. I think I earned 2 or so trophies that I never earned previously. I went back and I played this thing on the PS3. I fired it up, but it's such, I think, a magnificent game. You had the Infamous versus Prototype debate, and look, I don't want to make it about Infamous in the same way when I did my Infamous video, I didn't want to make it about Prototype, but I truly feel, and this is not clickbaity, I mean, how can it be 15 years later? Prototype is the better of these two games. I think Infamous 2 is phenomenal, but Prototype 1, I think, just wipes the floor with Infamous 1. I think it's actually not even close, and I believe that back in 2009. I still believe it now, especially playing these games back to back. So, like I said, I want to start kind of the story with, well, how did this all happen? I got the PlayStation 3, the system that really defined me as a gamer when I was, entering my teen years. I think I was 12 or 13. I got it not for Uncharted, not for Infamous, not for Resistance. I got it for Prototype. I literally wanted Prototype. So I bought the PS3, whether I bought it the same day or a few days before. I'm not 100% sure where the timeline lined up, but I bought it for Prototype, got the PS3, came with Resistance 1 and MotorStorm, made me a fan of both those franchises, and I picked up Prototype, and I still have it. So here it is. The original, maybe day 2, day 3, maybe day 1 case of Prototype. Now, I actually have the map. I think it's at my parents' house. If you recall, Prototype came with the little scroll, and you open the container, and it literally came with the map, and it had all the orbs, all the locations. And man, oh man, I still don't think I actually found all of them, but I have that. It's at my parents'. I don't have it here. We're several states away. But the case, I mean, iconic. Number one, I love the logo. The logo is so freaking good, but also his sword arm with like the symbiote-like, vein kind of thing pulsating through. You got the back. I mean, come on. And then even, I really like this. I think this is actually the thumbnail that my wife made right there. Him jumping in the air. I mean, you got this. Oh, my dear God. This was peak. This was peak fun. This was peak chaos. This felt like, and I didn't know it at the time, right? So, like, I literally just got the PS3. Just got it. And I fire this thing up, and this is the greatest looking game I've ever played in my life up till that time. I remember my cousin selling me on this game and on just future technology through showing me the opening cinematic. The opening cinematic where Alex is going through and just destroying these Black Watch soldiers, but kind of using all the different abilities you'll be using in the games, right? He shapeshifts. He uses several of the different weapon types. You have the girl that they shoot, which is kind of an iconic moment as well, because they think she's infected or she is infected. You have all of that, right? Now, that's the opening of the game, and I still think it's a perfect opening. I think it's a beautiful, just visual, kind of spectacle. But he showed me that, and that was actually the lead trailer. I actually think, because I remember looking this up years ago. I didn't look it up now. This is all based off memory. Remember when I think he had like a white kind of outfit. He's not wearing the same outfit. I'm pretty sure it goes from white to what, he's wearing classically in the base game. But I remember seeing that trailer and thinking, this is it. Like, we've peaked. We've peaked. And, I think younger people, as I get older, I think they do that. I did that quite often. When you see Uncharted 3, you say, that's the best looking game of all time. I don't even think you can get by that. And then you move up to the PS4 and Xbox One gen, you say, oh my dear God, how did this happen? But honestly, Prototype was the first game that I ever even thought that. Before I was playing Crash and Spyro and Sly Cooper and things like, and many other games, I guess. But seeing that cinematic for Prototype, I was like, oh my God, is this what I'm missing? Because I came into the generation late. 2009, that's late going into PS3, Xbox 360. And I was like, oh my God, this is the technology that they're doing. So that was my opening. He showed me that trailer. He showed me that trailer actually at another of my cousin's house. And I was like, okay, you sold me. I want the game. How do I get the game? Well, you need to buy the PS3 or Xbox, but I got PS3 at the time. And I said, oh my dear God, all right, well, let's do it. So I fire up the game, and it's instantly, I think, a classic. Instantly, as I've said, one of my favorite games of all time. So let's talk about this game. At the time, much like, I didn't know what technology was like and stuff, I also didn't know the history of the studio. So Radical Entertainment, who, RIP, these people, talented group. I didn't know the lineage and the link to the Hulk game. Now, I actually played Ultimate Destruction years and years prior. I think I might have owned it because I remember having the case. At the same time, I was a big renting guy. We didn't have a lot of money, so, we had to kind of rent quite often. So maybe it was rented, but regardless, I remember playing that game. And I remember that game also being just like peak fun. You go around as Hulk and you literally just create chaos and create havoc around the city. And I remember just loving it. I remember that game so well. I actually don't have that in my physical collection. I'm going to get it. But I didn't know, the linkage between that and this. This game obviously feels very, very similar to it. But it's just so much fun to go around the city and destroy everything. Now, upon replaying it, I didn't spend as much time doing this, but I remember back in 2009 spending days. I would just go down, like by the pier, by the water, and there'd be like the little strip. I would just go and I would use the sword, his main weapon, I would say, although the claws are probably the main weapon, especially because you get them first, but the sword is actually the last thing I believe you get. I remember just going down and just eviscerating every single civilian known to man there. The game, let me just say something about the game visually, right? Look, it's 15 years later. Does it look as good? No. The things that I thought looked unbelievable and that could never have been topped have obviously been topped, right? It's actually kind of nuts to go back in that machine and think about what you thought about it 15 years ago and think about it now. It still does look pretty. Like, I still think even the character models look pretty good. Like, it doesn't look bad at all, right? But one thing I'm incredibly impressed with is I would say the physics or dynamics of slicing people up. And, I don't want to get too brutal because I don't know about like the YouTube, what YouTube would do to this. But let's just say taking people out in this game, it's honestly almost like a piece of art because you just see how they break apart and separate from other. Again, I don't want to say too many things for YouTube, but it is incredible just how it looks. Like, I think it's so, I guess in a way, realistic. I've never done that before. I don't want to, do it. But just, slicing with the claw and breaking people up into like 2 or 3 or 4 different pieces. Unbelievable. Truly, like, I was shocked because, you see the cutscenes, you see some of the stuff, and you say, okay, this is not as good as I remember it being, right? Even there's something very, very satisfying to beating the ever-living blank out of people, right? And then consuming them, right? When you find the targets around the city. Oh my God. Even though when you watch it, because the resolution's not amazing, you watch it, and like, what is he actually even doing? Because it doesn't fully look like it, but you just hear like the noises. You just hear like, bam. Like, it sounds kind of gross, right? Because he's like pummeling their faces, and as he's like sucking them up. Although you don't really see it, right? It still kind of has that feel. But you see all those things and you say, okay, some stuff still holds up. Some stuff maybe in the audio, or you can imagine what's happening, and that kind of drives it. But when you're taking people out, it's insane how good it looks. Like, and remaking this, I don't even know if you could remake this. Like, thinking about it now after replaying it, because all that stuff, like, would that even fly in gaming? There's gory stuff and there's games that kind of push things, but to do that kind of gore level with, dismembering people, and then you do it now with the technology we have now, I don't actually even know if you could do that. But I just want to give huge props because I really think, hopefully I'm not some sort of like psycho, I was the only one doing it. I just feel it was so much fun to just literally create chaos right now, not just taking out innocent people, but anything. One of the things I think this game does so well, and, it's limited a little bit, right? But it's the zones. The zones in this game, I think, are very, very special, right? Because, especially as the game goes, because it starts out fine. Nobody's infected. You'll have your military presence, which, by the way, the amount of military in this game, unbelievable. They brought in everybody from the entire freaking globe into one location. But you have these zones, and as the game progresses, right, you have more military kind of setups, and then you have the infected zones, and it is unbelievable, again, in terms of the technology and something that I didn't really know how it would hold up. Well, a couple things. Number one, it is insane to go from a zone that is not, like, it's fine, right? Say like a gray zone. Going from that into pick one, red zone, blue zone, what, and seeing the change in the civilians, right? Like, you'll see people walking around, they're fine, as you get closer, the I don't even know what you would call it, but like the color scheme even starts to change. It starts to get more red. It starts to get more dark. And you'll start to see people running. And there were a few times when I was just going around the open world where I'd be in a fine zone and I would see people running for their lives. And I'd say, what? And all of a sudden, oh, there's the infected because the red zone is like right there. It is incredible. And the world is pretty big. Like, it's not the biggest. It's not going to rival the biggest open worlds, but it's big enough where you can be flying and you can see the red zone or the blue zone a little while away. Now, there is a lot of pop-ins in this game. That is a big issue. It was, I think, an issue back then, because some of those orbs would pop up only if you're within like 5 feet of them. That was a huge problem. That's why I couldn't collect them all, and I don't have the platinum in this game. Also, platinuming all those side events is just a total joke. I'm not going to do that, but there is pop-in problems. But looking at it now as a 27-year-old, very different than you looking back 15. So, yeah, I guess I was 12 when I got this game, if I'm thinking about my ages right. But, no, I mean, some of that technology hasn't aged well, right? The pop-ins are still bad, and, some things will do that. But it is insane to kind of just see the technology work and to see the zones transform into each other. Or sometimes the red and blue zones will be overlapping, and you'll have the military, you'll have a military base, and they'll be literally facing off in the streets or even at their own base with the infected. It's nuts how almost randomized it is. Now, you can take them out, right? And if you take out the base, the military base, or you take out the hive, they'll go away for a while, but then they'll come back. And that, I think, you can make it maybe a little bit more dynamic than that. You can make it more dynamic now. Back then, I think that's acceptable. I'm not going to get too mad about that. I actually kind of forgot about that. I thought once you take them out, they're gone for good. And then I read because it gives you like tutorial kind of like slideshows, and it said like, you take it out, it'll go away for a while, but then it comes back. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that originally when I played. But, again, the fun factor, I mentioned them fighting each other. I mean, they'll just be outright wars. There'll be helicopters just firing down on people. You could be running and they may not even be attacking you, but they'll be attacking civilians and infected and all sorts of stuff all around you. And also everything's fun to play. Like, you eventually can get in the tanks. You can eventually get in the helicopters. There's a variety of weapons like guns, rocket launchers and just assault rifle. And they're all, and in fact, they're actually very, very satisfying in this game. Again, maybe it's because of the mechanics of blowing things up, but, you never really get bored. I guess that's a thing to kind of get through, right? Because you got the civilians, you got the infected kind of runners, you got the bigger, there's many iterations of the infected. Then you also have the military stuff, and there's a couple different military, especially as the game goes. Unbelievable. Honestly, like I really want to stress the fun, but the thing is, because I believe this game is a masterpiece, because I believe this game is one of my favorite games of all time, everything in the game is good. I mean, I'm just touching on the gameplay and the fun side for now, but the rest of the game is also excellent. We'll talk about it in a second. But I really want to convey that this game is just so much fun to go around the city and just do whatever you want. Now, of course, there's limitations, but this is why I always never understood the Infamous versus Prototype thing. Prototype is so fast, and his dashing and his gliding and just everything about, and being able to shapeshift and they'll be able to recognize you. So you'll have to be careful when you shapeshift and who you shapeshift into. Oh my God. I mean, just so good. So you have all of that. I mean, is there anything I can say as a weakness? One thing I can say is it's so floaty in a fast way. Like, I think Infamous is actually floaty, so I don't even know if floaty is the right word. Prototype is so finicky at times. And I remember this. I mean, there'd be many times where you would dodge, and it just, sometimes the lock-on thing wouldn't work, and sometimes you would dodge or dash past something. There were issues with the movement, much in the way of like Assassin's Creed jumping you off something when you didn't want to jump off of it. Prototype would dash you somewhere, or you wouldn't be able to perfectly land somewhere. Now, I got to be real. I got it. Like, I nailed it because I've played it so much. I really think I understand if you want to call it floatiness or whatever you want to call it, I understand it, so I'm able to kind of like game it. But some of the side events, right, like some of the races almost, they can be very difficult, and you're going to want all the dashes to do them. But there's also the gliding ones, and the gliding ones I perfected. Like I would get right in the middle of the center dot. And, again, that's just kind of getting used to, okay, the gliding, he'll drop sometimes like a freaking rock, so you have to plan it right. It is a little finicky. Like it's not a perfect control scheme, but I think if you play it enough, because it's so fun and it's so fast, you kind of just learn a little bit of like the mannerisms of the system where it's like, okay, maybe he dashes a little too hard, so I have to pull back, or maybe I just don't do that third dash, whatever it might be, whatever the situation is, you kind of learn it as the game goes. And the side events are fun. I mentioned two of them, the racing, the gliding. There'll be outright wars that you have to, you don't get to pick the side, they pick it for you, but you're forced to be on a side. You have to take out the other side. Maybe you have to use a weapon, or maybe you have to use a certain, your own, I guess, like gun or your own weapon. And I think some of them are too hard. Even me being somebody that's played this game so many times, so I haven't played it in years. I mean, it's been probably 8 or so years since I played Prototype 1. But back when I first got it, 15 years, within that 15 years to 8 years, within the like 6-7 year stretch, I played this game so much. And also when I first bought it, look, again, like we didn't have a lot of money. I bought the PS3. I saved up money. I was a big saver growing up. I bought it. We didn't have a lot of games. In fact, by the time I got Prototype, I had MotorStorm, and I had Resistance. And I think that's it until that Christmas. So from June to December, 6 months, my birthday's almost 6 months removed from Christmas, I had those 3 games, and then I eventually got Uncharted and the rest of them. So this was a game that I just played an unbelievable, amount of. But even me, some of these ones are very, very difficult. Getting gold is very difficult. And like I said, to get the platinum trophy in this game, you got to play. You don't even have to get gold. You have to get gold on everything, but then you have to get platinum on everything. I just don't know how you even attempt that. So for me personally, even though it's one of my favorite games of all time, I'm not doing that. So, okay, well, we go through the gameplay. We go through kind of the world and how it works. What about the story and the characters? Again, this is where I think the game faltered in the eyes of the critics. Again, the interesting thing to me is I don't even think it was a competition. I think Prototype is a better game than Infamous. But I remember at the time, review scores, right? You just look at the scores, what IGN give these games, all that stuff. Infamous cleaned up. Infamous, I feel like, got a whole point more. I think Prototype was kind of sitting in the mid-70s in terms of, the overall score, and Infamous was in the mid-80s, maybe even high 80s. I remember it being that severe, and I remember a big weakness that I remember reading about while I guess I was playing, because I didn't care. In a funny way, I didn't care about reviews back then. I don't care about reviews now, but it's interesting to see what people were saying, right? A big knock on Prototype was the story and was the character, and I just don't get it. I think, is Alex Mercer the most deep character of all time? No, but it tells an incredibly interesting story about the origin of this virus and the different tests and the different like the first basically outbreak. I guess I want to call it like a town, right? Because I don't think it was a massive city. You have like the origin, you have how it got to where it was, you have Elizabeth Green, you have Alex Mercer. Who was Alex Mercer? And I found that to just be so, even now watching it, I found it just to be so fascinating. Now there's a couple like predictable things with Cross and other things. There's definitely things where it's like, they're telling you stuff in the future. You have that pretty cinematic scene, in the future where Alex is talking to somebody. It's like, who is it? Well, you figure it out. I would say not at the very beginning, but you find it out early in the game where it's like, all right, we get who you're talking to. Then they outright show you who they're talking to, and then eventually, okay, he takes off the mask and he takes off like the Bane breathing thing, and you can finally see who it is. The twist in terms of like the actual ending, not extremely good. I also found the boss fights were interesting, but I don't think boss fights work in this game. Again, if I were to say any negative, the Elizabeth Green, the set, like when she's like the creature, oh my dear, I hated it. I hated that. I mean, it's interesting to a degree because also you have freedom. That's a thing, I guess we somewhat touched upon in terms of the gameplay, but you have so much freedom in this game to handle things how you want. You can take out things using a helicopter. You could do the tank. You could just use Alex Mercer. You could throw things. You could transform. You could do whatever. There's actually a variety of ways of accomplishing something, whether it's a timed thing or whether you have unlimited time. There's a lot of ways of handling it. You can upgrade. There's so many upgrades. You can get so powerful. All of your weapons, your claws, being able to stick them into the ground, very, very cool, and all of them are pretty darn different. Now, there's some weapons I never really use. Like the muscle one, never found that all that effective. I mean, you had to pick up tanks and stuff, stuff, but never really used that all that much. For me, it was mainly the claws. The longer, like, swinging rope thing is very, very good for, getting on helicopters and stuff, and then his sword type thing. Those were my main three that I used, but there's so many ways of handling situations, and I don't know if that comes through in the boss fights, because in the boss fights, sometimes there's time things, sometimes it's just very difficult, and they're just dealing a lot of damage to you. You can always consume stuff, right, to get it back, and consuming much in the way of, like, beating the ever-living heck out of people, very satisfying, because everything that you do has a different way of consuming, right? So if you're using the claw, you'll consume somebody different than if you're using the sword, versus if you just grab them and beat them. So I thought that was very, very cool. But yeah, some of the boss fight, I'm trying to, like, cover, I guess, two things in one go. Consuming in this game is awesome. The boss fights, I just really don't think came through. And I remember that. I remember the final boss fight on the ship, and I was having, like, almost PTSD, because I died like 8 or 9 times now as a 27-year-old, and I think I have a very good handle on this game, and I died multiple times. And I remember as I was dying, I was actually, even before that, I was like, the final boss, I was trying to think, because some moments in this game were a little gap. Like, I remember him and his sister having a lot of conversations and stuff like that, but I remember, okay, there's a final boss, and I'm going to get destroyed, because I remember getting destroyed as a young teen or whatever, and I still did. But look, I mean, you have those moments, but overall, I mean, as I was saying with the story, like, I think it's quite interesting, because at the end of the day, spoilers for the end of Prototype, right? Alex Mercer's dead. Like, what you are now is not really him. Now, I like to believe it is. Like, that's kind of my own, fanfic type thing, where, look, like, a part of him, he's not all evil. He's not, and that's why I hate Prototype 2's story. I hate what they did to Alex Mercer in Prototype 2 and the comics, because the comics bridge the gap between 1 and 2. Alex Mercer is actually a somewhat complicated character, and I get that the end of this game kind of sets it up where, hey, he died, and this is really, it just kind of, like, sucked him in. It's the genes, it's the, maybe even some of the emotions, the memories, especially as they start to come back, but also this entity that you think is Alex Mercer is really everybody you've ever consumed. Number one, I think that's actually very, very cool, but I do think there's a piece of Alex Mercer that's, like, more in there than the rest. So, I really like that. I really like it. I really like the discovery element. And look, a lot of this game, some of it is just point blank told to you, right? Like, you'll have very short, like I said, meetings almost with your sister and the woman you believe to be your wife. Like, that was a pretty interesting just thing that they did. Like, kind of like this lie. He sold a lie in the beginning, and then he starts to figure it out. But the rest of the lore is told through those consuming things. So they'll be consuming missions, or they'll just be people, a lot of doctors. In fact, pretty much everybody is a doctor or, like, a military general, right? And you'll find them on the street, you'll consume them, and you'll learn. You'll learn that maybe they're watching you, and they're kind of studying, like, how does this thing work? And they also actually give some pretty good lore as to, like, how the actual virus, like, why can he mutate his arms and his body? They give reasonings, right? And they show these, like, flashes, these gory kind of almost real life events, whether it's war, whether it's amputations and surgeries and stuff, whether it's the origin of where this all started with kind of it being like a test run, and then it got out of hand again with Elizabeth Green, and just I think so cool. I really believe the lore in this game is awesome, and I don't understand why it was bagged. Like, again, some parts are predictable, and maybe that's why. Some parts are predictable. Not every character is, like, amazing. And I don't really think actually any character is amazing, but I think they each do their own role. And considering you're telling the tale of, like, an anti-hero who really doesn't know what he is, he's discovering it, and then he discovers that he died. And he's the one who unleashed the freaking virus on New. In fact, at the end of the game, they paint Alex Mercer to be like, in fact, Alex Mercer himself paints himself to be evil, right? Where he's like, hey, Alex Mercer did this. There's no, like, forgiving it. You just kind of move on from it. And but at the same time, he's not all evil, because literally throughout the whole game, he's literally looking for a cure. He's literally trying to stop this. He wants to stop them from destroying New York. Like, that's, if you fail the final mission, they drop a nuclear bomb and they destroy everything, right? So, like, there is some good in him. Again, why I hate the second game, because that's not him. I don't care what they did in the comics with that old man in the woods or whatever. That's not him. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I really liked the story. Again, the characters. I think Alex is a somewhat complex character, doesn't get enough credit. I think all the characters are at least decent enough. I think there's something very sinister, scary, but also very cool about Elizabeth Green. Like, I don't know. I just think it's a great cast. It's maybe not an elite cast. I think it's a great cast. I really like how the story is conveyed, the lore, and I don't think it deserved. I really don't. Like, I'd like to write a letter, to the editor of some of these sites. I don't think it deserved the scores that it got. And I really think, because you play it and you just have so much fun, right? So then you think, okay, like, why would it get bagged on? The only thing it could get bagged on is, I think, the story and characters, because it's just so much fun that you can't really, how can you complain too hard? How can you dock points on that? Well, you got to take it out on the other things. But at the same time, I think it was telling a somewhat complex, and also, what other game does this, by the way? Like, let me just circle back to the consuming thing. What other game does that, where, like, you're getting, maybe some games, but it's not like a common thing. You're getting piecemeal stuff. You literally, consume people, take them out, beat their head in, and you're learning something about the past, maybe even about the present. They have different roles. It's different voices going on. It's giving you backstory. It's giving you lore. What game actually does something like that, right? So I just think this game is unique, and this game is original. And I think that's something you can very much say about it. People will say this is like the Venom game we never got. I mean, I think that's true. And I think actually it's more than a Venom game because of everything else that I said. Truly, I think this is another game that's like ripe for a remake. Because I mentioned again like the visuals and what you would do for like the graphics and stuff. But I mean, I think this game would work so well. Getting a new game, I think it works so well now. I truly, truly do. So I hope one day, while the studio's gone, Activision has the rights. Xbox owns Activision now. Xbox, can we please get something going? Because I think you have an open world sandbox game truly unlike any other, and you're just sitting on it, and it's been sat on for I think it was 2009 was this, and then maybe it was 2012 or 2013, and maybe it was 2012 for Prototype 2. I mean, it's been sat on for, let's just say, at least 10-11 years, right? Over a decade this franchise has been sat on, and I think that's just a travesty. So there you go. There's my thoughts on Prototype. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Truly, I mean, I genuinely mean it when I say this is one of my favorite games of all time. Going back into it just felt good. Like, you just have those feelings. I'm sure everybody has those feelings. Games they grew up on, games that kind of define them. This was a game for me. This was a game that defined the PS3 early on. Before I even knew, I didn't even know what Uncharted was when I played. And Uncharted became, my favorite, at the time, my favorite franchise of all time. It goes back and forth between Uncharted and Sly Cooper, but I didn't even know. In Resistance, I only played the first game. I didn't play 2 and 3. So it's like Prototype defined the visuals, defined the tech, defined the fun factor of the PS3. And you know what? A lot of ways it never got beaten. And going back into it now, things have aged, things have gotten worse, like it doesn't hold up as certain things, but it's also like you can remember just the fun, and you can still have an absolute blast playing this game. It's the fun, it's the destruction, it's the mayhem. This game does it truly like no other, and I think it's why the game still has a very good, like, a fan group that's still around today that talk about it. It was that good. It truly was. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.